The rent has come due. After 13 long months, the eviction moratorium is over. So we will be here to come and figure out what's going to happen with this, where the protests are coming from, and what the next step really is as we go over into this. And that's the first half of the entire show. In other news, the DOJ is demanding the Trump tax returns after all this time because I guess the Fourth Amendment doesn't apply once you become president. Two-thirds of voters want Congress to investigate the 2020 riots, but not the 2021 riot on January 6th when people were let in and took selfies. And PayPal is to research transactions that fund hate groups. It's going to be all this and more. Hey, do you trust the plan yet? I'm Jay Edgar, and this is Contemporary. Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Contemporary. My name is Jay Edgar, and boy, is this going to all get interesting here because we're going to go over this entire rental thing that's pretty much going to dominate the program, too, because out of 34 tabs, 7 of them have to do with the rental thing, and then everything else is just kind of a scattershot. Everywhere else, they tried to feed fun stuff in over the weekend here, but we're going to get through all of that. We're going to get to all of it, and discuss some of the other things, plus the Ferengi rules of acquisition. We are moving right down the list fairly quickly here, so it's going to be all this and more over on Contemporary. But before we get started, head on over and check out some of my friends from around the internet who are coming together with me to work on a new project that we are coming, hopefully, with a fall release here. So head on out there and check out The Generational Gap, The Daily Ignoramus, The Breakdown with Birkenhoff, The R-Rated Conservative, and The Freckles and Brit Show. All those shows are coming back. So make sure you head on over there and check them all out. It's going to be a great time. Some of them have some new projects working here, but they will all be able to come together this fall for the new project that we have going. So you can check them all out and help me support great creators. Let's get in and look at the finance for you guys. Starting with the Dow. The Dow took a tumble throughout the day. Wow. I'm already talking like Joe Biden, man. And the thing. Come on. The Dow took a tumble over Friday, dropping down about 0.5%. 34,935.47 was the final that we saw coming back up out of that. And I'm guessing a lot of that had to do with the fact that a lot of these companies looked at this and said, wow, over the weekend, the rent is going to give us problems, but it does look like the futures went back up. So something came in on the futures contracts and saved all these people. I don't know how all this is going to go, and to be completely honest, I anticipate another drop, but of course this is not official financial advice because I don't know enough about these markets that I can make that official prediction, but I'm just anticipating where some of the sell-off is going to be, as some people have to sell assets in order to pay for their homes or make rent or any number of other things that they have to do here. But we're going to watch this as it goes. Looking at your Bitcoin is at $39,498 and 70 US cents, holding steady. Now that Amazon has announced that there will be places for you to spend your Bitcoin. So keep an eye on that and watch where that goes. Looking in at your gas prices over the weekend, we see a mild jump here. One station in Madison is still at $2.79, but it appears the rest of them have moved to $2.85, which means that elsewhere in the country, in your local station, you have likely seen a 6-cent jump up in gas. But hey, no more mean tweets. All right, and let's get into your IBD. Starting with IBD, Dow Jones Futures, market rally, nears high, Square makes huge deal. Li Auto, Tesla rivals, report strong sales from Ed Carson. Dow Jones Futures rose modestly Monday morning, along with S&P 500 Futures and NASDAQ Futures. The stock market rally held near highs last week, with a number of leaders flashing buying opportunities. Square announced a major acquisition and released blowout earnings, but sales below views. Li Auto reported booming July sales as Tesla's other China EV rivals NIO and XPeng also reported deliveries. Square appeared to pay $29 billion for Afterpay, an Australian fintech specializing in buy now, pay later services. The digital payment leader also released quarter 2 results ahead of Thursday's scheduled date. Square earnings per share spiked 266% to 66 cents, with revenue up 266% to $4.68 billion. Analysts expected EPS of 30 cents on sales to $5.03 billion. Square stock slid 5% before the open. Square stock fell 6.3% last week to $247.26, below a $254.88 cup with handle buy point. Li Auto on Sunday reported July deliveries of 8589, up 251% versus a year earlier. XPeng on Monday reported deliveries jumped 228% to 8040. NIO deliveries rose 124.5% to 7931. Fellow Chinese EV maker BYD company is set to release July sales within the next few days. Tesla China sales for July won't come for at least another week. Tesla has made a series of moves in China, including exports, cheaper variants, and outright price cuts. Chinese EV makers are trying to maintain rapid growth amid chip shortages and other supply chain issues plaguing the auto industry. Meanwhile, China stocks have come under heavy pressure as Beijing cracked down on a private industry, including the US-listed Chinese companies, internet and consumer data-heavy firms, and more. Here's the thing to remember about Li Auto, XPeng, and NIO, though, as we go into this, is that they are Chinese companies, which means that the Chinese government does have an interest in them. And if the Chinese government needs to go through and say, okay, we buy 8,000 new vehicles out here to make sure that evil Tesla from America doesn't get to sell here, they will do that. And they will stick them in a storage container. But they will buy them to keep the orders back up off of that. Keep that in mind. This is not a free market system they have over there. They try to make it sound like, oh, no, we are free market. We're more free market than America. But they're really not. The government will come out and print the money, pour it into these cars, put them in a storage shed and say, look how much better our cars are performing than yours. You stop selling here. So, and I don't know if that's what's happening, but I know that they've got the capability of doing that. So that's what we see coming up with that. Let's look at the futures. Dow futures rose 0.35% versus fair value, as S&P 500 futures advanced 0.5%, and NASDAQ 100 futures also climbed 0.5%. Crude oil futures fell more than 1% before the open. The Senate could vote on the actual bipartisan infrastructure bill with roughly $550 billion in new spending over several years. Later this week, the House isn't expected to vote on the legislation until there's an agreement on a massive $3.5 trillion spending bill. A national eviction ban imposed during the pandemic expired on Saturday that could spur foreclosures and evictions, as well as reduce consumer spending outside of housing. It could spur more job seekers. And remember, overnight action in Dow futures and elsewhere doesn't necessarily translate into actual trading in the next regular stock market session. A little preview of what I look at when I see some of this is, I do want to point out before we even get through the CNBC article on the finance side of this, that a lot of states do have laws on the books that prevent a landlord from just kicking somebody out willy-nilly off the street. Now, in Wisconsin, with 16,000, and we'll talk about that later too, people who are facing an eviction, which is, by the way, incredible. I had no idea the number could have been that high. But they were kind of tight-lipped on all the records here until the eviction moratorium was over too. Don't want to see? No, people don't abuse the system. What are you talking about? Well, now that the evictions are coming up, now that we're going to see what the system's going to do, that is a large percent of renters in this state. But in Wisconsin, you are required to give a 30-day notice in order to remove somebody from the premises. And even still, it's going to take a little while to get through the court systems as well. So there's a chance for some of these people, but you have to give at least a 30-day notice. And the courts have to order off on it too. So that's what we're going to see coming out of that. Let's check in with CNBC on what they're saying here. Stock futures rise to kick off August trading after S&P notches 6 straight winning month. This is from Maggie Fitzgerald. U.S. stock futures rose on Monday as investors geared up for the first trading day of August. Dow Jones futures average rose 112 points or 0.3%. S&P 500 futures gained 0.4%, and NASDAQ 100 futures added 0.5%. The S&P 500 and the Dow sit less than 1% from new all-time highs. Stocks continued to shake off concerns about the Delta variant of COVID, and stocks that would benefit most from a continued economic recovery led the gains in pre-market trading on Monday. Shares of Carnival were up 3% in pre-market trading. Major banks, including Morgan Stanley and Bank of America, were higher. Airline shares were mostly higher. We believe the reopening and recovery trend is on track to continue to see upside for equities, wrote Mark Heifel, Chief Investment Officer of Global Wealth Management at UBS. We expect S&P 500 to climb around 4650 by June next year versus 4395 at present. But we see the greatest upside for cyclical parts of the market, including energy, financials, and Japanese stocks. The Senate was finalizing the text of a bipartisan infrastructure bill, also bolstering optimism on Monday. The bill includes $550 billion of new spending over 5 years. That's on top of previously approved funds of around $450 billion. Caterpillar shares added 1% in pre-market trading. That's going to be important because if we do see infrastructure, Caterpillar, Volvo, even John Deere to an extent, those are all going to see your gains because if we actually get infrastructure off of this, which, well, time will tell, people are going to be buying new equipment, new trucks. So your trucking companies are, your truck manufacturers, not your trucking companies. Well, your trucking companies aren't usually a public offering unless it's a big one like Werner or Old Dominion or something like that. But you'll see like International, Kenworth, Peterbilt, Freightliner, those will all go up. So if we actually get this, we're going to see some of your industrials go. I think you're going to see some of your tech slide, but well, that's what we have to see. Let's get into the big news of the day from Politico. Down the drain. Millions face eviction after Biden lets protections expire. And there is a big image of the protest. We have the right to the city. We shall not be moved. Protect families. Let us stay in our homes. This is from Katie O'Donnell. As the clock runs out on a nationwide eviction ban for what's expected to be the final time, millions of tenants are staring at the prospect of losing their homes as they wait for emergency rental aid that the government has failed to deliver. The federal eviction moratorium in place since September is set to expire Saturday after the Biden admin refused to extend it. That's not what happened. And Democrats in Congress couldn't muster the votes to intervene. Now, lawmakers and activists fear an unprecedented surge in evictions in the coming months, just as the highly transmissible Delta variant causes a spike in coronavirus cases. That's going to be important because that's what they're going to use when they say, "Evil Republicans! Oh my God!" In spite of the fact that, surprisingly enough, that's not the top story off of this, is evil Republicans. The federal eviction moratorium in place in September is set to expire Saturday after the Biden admin refused to extend it and Democrats in Congress couldn't muster the votes to. I read that paragraph already. The eviction wave is expected to hit population centers across the country. Housing advocates point to renters in Ohio, Texas, and parts of the Southeast where tenant protections are generally low, housing costs are high, and economic problems from the pandemic linger, as particularly at risk. Even though it has its own ban in place through August, New York is also concerned because it has been especially slow at distributing rental assistance funds to the hundreds of thousands of tenants in the state who are behind on their rent. We've been circling a drain, said Kansas City Tenants Director Tara Raghuveer, a housing organizer in Kansas. On Saturday, poor and working class tenants go down the drain in some places. The last-minute gridlock between President Biden and Democrats in Congress that resulted in the demise of the eviction ban this week threatens to impose new economic burdens on state and local governments. The officials will have to respond to mass evictions triggered by landlords, including many struggling financially themselves because of lost revenue, who are poised to kick out tenants who fell behind on their bills during the pandemic. The renter safety net is severely weakened, with fewer than a dozen state eviction bans in place, and state and local governments having dispersed only a fraction of the $46.5 billion in rental assistance that Congress authorized over the past year. President Biden, in a statement Friday, called on state and local governments to take all possible steps, to immediately disperse these funds. Given the ending of the moratorium, you're a little bit too late if you're saying that on fucking Friday, you old fucking codger. There can be no excuse for any state or locality not accelerating the funds to landlords and tenants that have been hurt during this pandemic, he said. Every state and local government must get these funds out to ensure that we prevent every eviction we can. Biden also suggested that they institute their own bans. State and local governments should be aware that there's no legal barrier to moratorium at the state and local level. Yeah, but here's the problem with that. And I wanted to get through a little bit more of this before I started adding actual commentary to this, but here's the problem with that. You're right, and absolutely Biden is right, and I am all for federalism on this. Here's the problem that the state and local lawmakers are going to face when they do something like this. Now, the city of Madison can go up and say, well, yes, we will put a new municipal eviction ban in place. You cannot evict anybody from the city of Madison. First and foremost, a lot of the people in the city of Madison have not paid their rent by choice, as has been pointed out by other creators over the weekend. A lot of the people in the city of Madison said, oh, the federal government's just going to protect us, so we're going to take a vacation, we're going to stop working, we're going to use these funds that we normally would have used for our exorbitantly high rent for living in the city of fucking Madison. We're going to take all this money and we're going to go and buy a new TV and then we're going to go to Florida and go wakeboarding or some stupid shit like that. They didn't do it because they were struggling. They did it because they had better stuff to spend their money on. But the city of Madison could come down and make that law, and now they've got to face down their taxpayers, the people who are actually paying their municipal tax, who, instead of having to go to D.C. and go through all the stupid security and the mask thing and everything else to get into the House chamber to talk to Nancy Pelosi and the people off of there, they can go right down to the municipal building and say, hey, what the fuck? One of the nice parts about this federalized system that everybody has been going through, that we've been trying to shift more blame and more of the responsibility onto the federal government rather than at the local level where it belongs, is that there is no way. The people who are making the laws are untouchable. They sit in their ivory tower, which has a gigantic rotunda on it, and it's not really a tower, but they still sit in their ivory tower on Capitol Hill and say, we can make whatever law we want, and nobody can come and call us on our fucking bullshit. In fact, the last time somebody tried to call them on their fucking bullshit, the mainstream media labeled it an insurrection. But your state and your local governments don't have that luxury. A lot of them have to go to the same grocery store as the people they're fucking over. So no, they're going to run into their own problems when they try to do this, which is where this belonged at the first place. This should have never been a federal program. If Milwaukee looked at this and said, well, we're going to lose half of our business in rental, we have to make an eviction ban to make sure that people can't do this out there, that belonged in the city of Milwaukee. That didn't belong in Washington, D.C., making decisions, the same decisions for Wyoming and Wisconsin, for Nevada and California, and for Montana and Texas. It didn't belong there. It never did. If you're going to make a stupid law like this, then face down the people who you're fucking over. Housing advocates are warning of awful images and hardships for many Americans who have suffered the most from COVID-19. My biggest concern is the dynamic of potentially tens of thousands of sheriff's deputies and other law enforcement officials executing evictions around the country at the same time in the hottest month of the year, said David Dworkin, president and CEO of the National Housing Conference, an affordable housing advocacy group, whose brother Scott is also an asshat. I could go into that story too if you really wanted me to. About 7.4 million adult tenants reported they were behind on rent in the latest U.S. Census Bureau survey, which was taken during the last week of June and the first week of July. About 3.6 million tenant households said that they were somewhat likely or very likely to face eviction over the next 2 months. Others say the population of at-risk renters is much larger. The left-leaning Center on Budget and Policy Priorities estimates that 11.4 million tenants, 16% of adults living in rental housing, are not caught up on rent. I am. The lapse of the eviction ban, which was first imposed by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention in September as a COVID safety measure, comes after landlords warned that it cost them billions of dollars each month. Industry groups, including the National Association of Realtors, lobbied against extending the moratorium this week and made the case to lawmakers that it unfairly shifts economic hardships to the backs of housing providers who have jeopardized their own financial futures to provide essential housing to renters across the country. And this is where we get into some of the commentary that goes along with this. And we'll go over the rest of these articles here just but I want to point a couple things out to this. Now, first and foremost, what this is we're looking at a knee-jerk reaction from the CDC to address a problem that required an actual thoughtful solution, a way to do it, a way to sit down. And this was only supposed to be a couple months, not almost a year. I said 13 months before, but I was actually mistaken because it was 11 months. It was an 11-month eviction ban. I thought this started before this. But regardless, there are some problems that go along with this. Now, I will not sit down here and tell you that this did not help people at some point. There were people out there in small town America and even in big city America who are renting, who lost their jobs, who worked at a retail job, who worked at a dealership, who worked at some place where they had to be in person all the time, and because of staff cuts or business cuts, they actually had to be either let go from work, or they had to be parlayed or sitting on unemployment, which, by the way, keep in mind, you're also getting, what was it, $300 extra on unemployment still in some places, because the federal government is still allowing it to come in. So a lot of the times, a lot of these people are making more on unemployment than they are sitting at home. Going to work. So I do have, I have some trouble understanding where some of the struggle comes from, but to play the devil's advocates against some of the more right-leaning people, there are honest people who actually did get caught up with this, that this eviction ban helped. There are honest people out there that got helped by this. And if we only could extend the eviction moratorium for the people who are honest that actually got help for this, then that's fine. But now we've got to sit and parade everybody back out in front of a judge to say, let's look at your records. Are you actually struggling with this, or did something else happen? And are you fucking up? And are you fucking off right now? Because there are also the people out there who have looked at this, as I mentioned, and said, we can eat the landlord. I don't have to pay my rent, and I'm not going to get evicted because I can't get evicted. And they've gone out and they've bought a new car, a new TV. They've gone out and gone on a vacation, an extravagant vacation, because, hey, I'm not going to work. Why the fuck would I sit in the house? Oh, hey, no, I don't have to worry about the coof. I'll go to North Carolina where there's no mask mandate, and I'll go windsurfing or something else like that. We saw a lot of that throughout this, and there are those people out there that are legitimately hurting the landlords. Now, I've got a feeling that the people who were actually struggling have gone through, and I'm willing to bet that a lot of them, and I don't know the statistics on this, but I'm willing to bet a lot of the people who actually did struggle legitimately also lived in a place like a room in a house with an elderly person, or a little building that's owned by a guy who lives maybe a couple miles away, who's just struggling to go through and works his ass off himself and then comes in to try to repair his building on top of everything else. I am fully willing to bet that a lot of the people who are struggling are in those situations and have worked out a deal with the person who owns their building. It may not be a situation of they just choose to rent because they might move around a lot. They choose to rent because their credit suffered some sort of a loss at some point, and that's the only option that they have at this moment. But they still, they lost their job. They couldn't qualify for unemployment, and they'll still sit here and they'll struggle along with this. But yes, there's still the people out there who have said, hey, I can't get evicted. I don't have to pay. And I'm sure that it's at least 51-49 biased in the favor of the people who just looked at this and said, hey, I can't get evicted. There's no consequences. Ha ha. Oh yeah, of course I'll re-sign my lease. Ha ha. So that's where we're sitting on with this. The rent is due. We'll figure out. But anyway, going back to what I was saying with this, because I completely got sidetracked from what I was saying. So we've got the actual struggling renter. And the person who looked at this and said, fuck that, fuck the renter, fuck the landlord, eat the rich, this kind of person. But we've also got equal protection under the law, which means that if we help the person who's actually struggling, we have to help the irresponsible person who says, eat the rich, fuck the landlord. And a lot of these aren't big companies either. A lot of people who are renting from a person who lives down the road. Well, let me rephrase that, because that's actually not completely true either. A lot of the people out in rural America, like the situation I live in, the building is owned by somebody who makes a modest salary, who just looked at this and said, this is an easy way to come out and get a little bit of extra cash flow. I've got the expenses to go back in, but I can make a little bit of cash flow, fix up this building, get a little bit, and help some people out, help 8 families out while I do this. A lot of the rental properties out there are that, but yes, we've also got the big industry who can come back and absorb this. Like, if the eviction moratorium goes up, they start kicking people out willy-nilly. They don't care. They never have to see their people. It's a multinational corporation, or it's a big New York-based corporation who owns a building in Milwaukee and says, oh, you can't pay your rent? Oh, sorry, I'm going to rent your place out to somebody who can. Whereas a lot of these smaller buildings are people who, they live in the community. They just took out a big mortgage because, hey, they can make a little bit of money and help people. And they actually have to see the eyes of the people who are struggling or didn't want to pay, and there are people out there who are abusing them, beating the shit out of them, hosting huge parties, verbally abusing their landlords, coming out and posting online everything about eat the rich, cancel rent, cancel this, cancel that. Those people need to be taken out too. So, yeah, we've got a lot of different sides to this. There's a lot of different ways to look at this, a lot of things to see with this, but yeah, it's going to be a struggle. That's for sure. All right, let's go grab one from CNBC. Anger mounts as Biden, Congress allow evictions bans to expire. This comes to CNBC via the Associated Press. Anger and frustration mounted in Congress over the weekend as a nationwide eviction moratorium expired during a surge in the COVID-19 pandemic. One Democratic lawmaker even camped outside of the Capitol in protest as millions of Americans faced being forced from their homes. Lawmakers said they were blindsided by Joe Biden's inactions as the midnight Saturday deadline neared, some furious that he called on Congress to provide a last-minute solution to protect renters. That was their job. The rare division between the president and his party carried potential lasting political ramifications. New York Rep. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, D-Twitch, on Sunday said that Democrats have to call a spade after the deadline expired. We'll cover that in just a bit. More than 3.6 million Americans are at risk of eviction, some in a matter of days. The moratorium was put in place by the CDC and as part of the COVID-19 crisis when jobs shifted and many workers lost income. Democrats piled on in frustration. Maxine Waters, the chair of the Financial Services Committee, said Saturday on CNN, "We thought that the White House was in charge." If you thought the White House was in charge, you have never read the Constitution in your life. By all measures, you're in charge in Congress, constitutionally. Now, it's co-equal branches, of course, but by all measures, because you represent the people directly, especially in the House, by all measures, you're in charge. Not the White House. This is not a monarchy. We are only hours away from a fully preventable housing crisis, said Senator Elizabeth Warren of Mass during a floor speech in a rare Saturday session as senators labored over an infrastructure package. We have the tools and we have the funding, Warren said. What we need is the time. You're $30 trillion in debt. You don't have the funding. The eviction ban was intended to prevent further virus spread by people put out on the streets and into shelters. Congress approved nearly $47 billion in federal housing aid. Oh, excuse me. Allergies are kicking my ass again. Aid to the states during the pandemic, but it has been slow to make it to the hands of the renters, and the landlords owed the payments. The day before the ban was set to expire, Biden called on local governments to take all possible steps to immediately disperse the funds. There can be no excuse for a state or locality not accelerating the funds to landlords and tenants that have been hurting during this pandemic, he said in a statement late Friday. Brian Deese, the director of the White House National Economic Council, echoed that sentiment. On Sunday, on Fox News, no landlord should evict without seeking the rental assistance, and states and localities need to get that money out urgently, and they can do that, Deese said. House Speaker Pelosi urged House Democrats in a letter Saturday night to check into how the money already allocated has been distributed so far into their own states and localities. She said the Treasury Department, which transferred the funds earlier this year, offered to brief lawmakers next week. Biden set off the scramble by announcing Thursday he would allow the eviction ban to expire instead of challenging a recent Supreme Court ruling signaling this would be the last deadline. The White House has been clear that Biden would have liked to extend the federal eviction moratorium because of the spread of the highly contagious Delta variant of the coronavirus, but there were also concerns that challenging the court will lead to a ruling restricting the administration's ability to respond to future public health crises. Yeah, they were afraid that it would open up a can of worms that would strip the executive branch of more power. To which point, I kind of wish that they would have gone after the fucking thing. Go strip them of more power. So, yeah, everyone's pissed off about that. Let's read from Vox, shall we? That's one we never do on this channel. From Vox. Support journalism that empowers people through understanding. Fuck off. Federal eviction protections have ended, leaving renters scrambling. From Miriam Gamar. It's August 1st and rent is due. That's a big change for many Americans who have been unable to pay rent, but were protected from eviction by a federal moratorium. Now these protections are gone. Due to widespread job loss and health risks of the pinko fucking pox, many renters in the U.S. face difficulty making their rent payments every month when the pandemic began in early 2020. And the federal government stepped in to prevent people from getting evicted in the midst of it. As part of this response, the CDC instituted a moratorium in September of 2020 that prevented landlords from evicting their tenants regardless of whether they could pay monthly rent in full or at all. Last month, the moratorium was already on borrowed time, as the Supreme Court warned that it would not extend rent protections past the end of July. Several justices, including Brett Kavanaugh, supported this. In my view, clear and specific congressional authorization via new legislation would be necessary for the CDC to extend the moratorium past July 31st, wrote Kavanaugh. The Biden admin did challenge the Supreme Court decision on Thursday, 2 days before the program was set to expire, by formally asking Congress to pass an extension. But Congress would have to have passed new legislation to create an extension and did not do so in time before leaving for an August recess, so the moratorium has officially expired. Not that you had the votes to do it anyway, but you're going to come back and pretend that you did. So, Yeah, they've been looking into this for quite a while at this point. This changes a lot for renters who have to reckon with their landlords, some of whom have not received regular rent for almost a year. Renters are now required to pay any missed payments, and in some states, the landlord is owed late fees for any late payments since the moratorium was enacted. Utilities are a bit of a gray area, but generally, if the landlord is responsible for paying a certain utility, in most cases, they are not permitted to turn it off. Cori Bush was at the forefront for the fight for a further moratorium extension. As a formerly homeless person who has also faced eviction in the past, she has been vocal about the need to extend the moratorium and slept in the U.S. Capitol steps on Friday night to protest. I am dirty, sticky, sweaty, and I have on what I had on last night. This is how people will have to live if we don't do something. They deserve human dignity and deserve for people that represent them to show up, do the work, and make sure basic needs are met today, she told CNN's Jessica Dean on Saturday. All right, we're going to take a second and listen to Elizabeth Warren talking about extending and expanding the moratorium. So give me just a second.
President.
Senator from Massachusetts.
I'm going to drop this right here and give that a listen here for just a second.
Thank you, Mr. President. And thank you, Senator Brown, for your leadership on this. I'm very sorry that the Republicans will not agree to moving forward on this bill today. The urgency of the moment cannot be overstated. President Trump's utterly failed response to the coronavirus pandemic has allowed a dangerous virus to spread uncontrolled throughout our nation. More than 4 million Americans have contracted coronavirus, and more than 140,000 people are dead. While the death toll mounts, the president's failure to control the spread of COVID-19 has caused a second crisis, following closely on the heels of the virus. Our economy is in shambles, and now we are forced to fight on two fronts to keep families safe from the coronavirus and safe from the economic fallout. So I'm here on the Senate floor today to talk about one piece of the economic emergency unfolding in our country. Right now, we are just days away from a completely preventable housing crisis. The CARES Act eviction moratorium is currently protecting more than 12 million renters from losing their homes while a virus rages across our country. On Friday at midnight, those protections will disappear, allowing a tsunami of evictions that will hit communities of color and low-income families the hardest, unless we act now. Let us be clear. Eviction is not a new problem in this country. Too many families were already on the financial brink before the virus crashed our economy. Close to 40% of adults don't have enough cash to cover an unexpected $400 expense. More than half of households didn't have enough savings to cover 3 months without income. And more than 1 in 4 renters were paying more than half of their income to housing. Now, families are facing the worst economic crisis of their lifetimes. About 30 million Americans are officially unemployed or out of work. 1/2 of all Americans have lost employment income since the start of this pandemic, and communities of color have been hit the hardest. It is not possible to fix this economy without containing the virus. But we can make sure that millions of Americans don't lose their homes because President Trump closed his eyes and hoped that the pandemic would just.
And that's actually been a recurring theme through all this, and I pointed that out too. I pointed that out over the weekend, and I got accused of being in support. The GOP doesn't have good ideas either. So over the weekend, I posted out on Twitter that, DeSantis and Abbott are trending because the head, excuse me, I forget which department that Scott Dworkin heads, but the head of X department wants to blame Republicans rather than having good ideas. And some independent filmmaker went back and commented on it and said, GOP doesn't have good ideas either. Well, I never said that they did. That's the problem with that. But what I am saying is that this is a long, long time Since the 60s and probably before, a blame game between the two big parties in this country, and Elizabeth Warren continues that great tradition out here. Well, we could do this except for President Trump, that evil President Trump, who hasn't been in office for 7 months. 6.5. Let's go 6.5. But still, for half a year, this guy hasn't been in office. And you have majorities in both houses. Yes, you still have to filibuster, but you have majorities in both chambers that are sympathetic with the president at hand. Do something. Make something that you can sell to the other side and then force it through. Do something. But just come back and play, oh, well, it's because of the evil orange man once again. We're going to be coming down to this. And, Barack was famous for this. I hate to go back that far into this, but Barack was famous for this. And Donald did it too. Do not get me wrong. Don did it fucking too. But Barack was famous for this right up until the very end. Right up until some of the last speeches of 2016. Barack, we're struggling for some of the stuff right now. But you know, it's it's W's fault. No, that's a thing. It's W's fault. I didn't do anything wrong. It's all W. It's 2016. My policy's been in place for 7 years. Or 8 years. Depending on how you look at it. But it's still W's fault. It's that George W. Bush. I'm telling you. I inherited this mess. And I got this feeling that we're going to Hong Kong hear this for the next 4 years because of the absolute 100% legally elected president, Hong Kong. All right, as promised in the CNBC article, we're going to talk about AOC biscuit here. From Fox News, AOC blames Democrats for eviction moratorium expiring. We cannot in good faith blame the Republican Party, puppy. From Danielle Wallace. The Honorable and Venerable Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, D-Twitch, on Sunday blamed Democrats, both in the House of Representatives and at the White House, for allowing the eviction moratorium to expire, as millions of American families are at risk of being kicked out of their homes. The House and House leadership had the opportunity to vote to extend the moratorium, and there was frankly a handful of conservative Democrats in the House who threatened to get on planes rather than hold this vote, she said on CNN, State of the Union. We have to really just call a spade, Poppy. We cannot in good faith blame the Republican Party when House Democrats have the majority. So the Supreme Court ruled 5-4 in June to allow the CDC to keep its eviction moratorium in place until July 31st, saying that Congress would have to authorize any further extensions. But the White House still waited a month until the day before the House adjourned to release a statement asking Congress to extend the moratorium, Ocasio-Cortez said. A member of the House Financial Services Committee, which has jurisdiction over housing, she told CNN's Jake Tapper that representatives have been pressing the House Secretary and the Biden admin for their stance on extending the eviction moratorium, but they were not being forthright about that advocacy and that request until the day the House adjourned, puppy. The House is... Oh shit, we can watch the video of this.
So you've been warning that this eviction deadline was coming for weeks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Democrats control the House. You guys control the Senate. You guys control the White House. Nothing aggressive was done by leadership until just a couple days ago. Who's to blame here?
Well, I think there's a couple of issues here. First of all, you are absolutely correct in that the House and House leadership had the opportunity to vote to extend the moratorium. And there were many, and there was frankly a handful of conservative Democrats in the House that threatened to get on planes rather than hold this vote. And we have to really just call a spade a spade. We cannot, in good faith, blame the Republican Party when House Democrats have a majority. Now, there is something to be said for the fact that this court order came down on the White House a month ago, and the White House waited until the day before the House adjourned to release a statement asking on Congress to extend the moratorium. This came after weeks. I sit on the Financial Services.
Okay, you guys knew about this at the same time the White House did. If you really want to actually come out and say that, well, we had to wait for the White House, puppy, why weren't you doing this beforehand? In fact, we knew this was coming, and we knew that the Realtors Association was going to challenge the Supreme Court and the CDC on this all the way back in March. We knew that this was happening. Hell, we knew this was going to happen in October of last year. We knew that this was going to come down to this at some point. Why was there not a plan in place by that point? And hey, you're not a freshman representative anymore, so you have to answer for the 116th Congress.
Services Committee, which has jurisdiction over housing. We had, the housing secretary there asking about the administration's stance. We asked the Biden administration about their stance, and they were not being really forthright about that advocacy and that request until the day before the House adjourned. And so the House was put into I believe, a needlessly difficult situation. And it's not just...
You can work independent of the executive branch. I don't know if you know what co-equal is, but President Biden is not a king.
Me saying that, Financial Services Chairwoman Maxine Waters has made that very clear as well. And so there's a couple of contributing factors here. We have governors who are also not getting this emergency rental assistance out in time, which is forcing this extension, what we would like an extension of the moratorium. The fact of the matter is that the problem is here. The House should reconvene and call this vote and extend the moratorium. There's about 11 million people that are behind on their rent at risk of eviction. That's 1 out of every 6 renters in the United States.
Congress is out of town for the next 7 weeks. Speaker Pelosi made it clear in a letter to Democrats last night she's not calling the House back. The Senate's here because they got the infrastructure bill. And you heard Manchin say that he thinks that the moratorium should be extended so that these tens of billions of dollars can get out the door. What's your response?
Well, listen, the House adjourned technically for 7 weeks, but I want to be very clear that due to the ongoing negotiations with the bipartisan infrastructure bill, we were given very specific instructions that we are set to adjourn for 7 weeks, but every member of the House of Representatives is currently on a 24-hour callback notice in anticipation of that bipartisan infrastructure bill.
But we have 24 hours to get back if they tell us we need to get back, Poppy. So that's where they're sitting right now off of this. And, right, it is a lot of the blame game. There's not a lot of solution going on here. Some of your cities are struggling and running out to say, what the fuck can we do? But yeah, a lot of what we're seeing out of Washington is the blame game. I do enjoy the fact that the Honorable and Venerable Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, D-Twitch, is placing the blame at the feet of Democrats. Whereas Warren is like, oh, President Trump did this and did that. Actually looking at people who are currently holding office and could have done something about this. I do enjoy that. But that's where we sit for this. Let's grab one here from my neck of the woods. Reading from WISN 12 out of Milwaukee. 16,000 Wisconsinites at risk of losing homes following end of eviction moratorium. Which is an insane number to me, by the way, because I didn't think for a second that there were that many people who were struggling in this state. But I thought that a lot of the people in this state, because we didn't have a full lockdown, were going to work and just paying the rent as normal. But there again, that comes from a small town mentality where I live in a town that's full of multifamily homes. We're in a lot of them, and this building is the exception. The person who owns the building occupies one of the units in the multifamily building. Let's see. Do I have an author given? I do not have an author given on
eviction
this.
moratorium.
Shut up, you. Go away. Nobody likes you. Oh, shut the fuck up. All right, out of Wisconsin, federal eviction moratorium that has been in place since the pandemic began has come to an end as thousands of Wisconsin renters are at risk of losing their homes. The moratorium had protected renters who were unable to pay rent due to financial hardships caused by the coronavirus pandemic. More than 11 million Americans nationwide also may be impacted. While many landlords say they can only go so long without being paid, some tenants are left worried about what their next move will be. I'm willing to bet a lot of them are going to be, well, Mom, Dad, I don't have a place to live. especially around Madison. I'm sure a lot of the ones in Madison are like, Mom, Dad, can you convert the guest house into just a regular house for me to live in? Because I got kicked out of my place in Madison. You laugh, but there's a lot of that going on around the University of Wisconsin. And Marquette, too, if we go over onto the Milwaukee side. The moratorium ending, it basically means that at any moment I could end up on the street, said Heather Waller, a renter who's benefited from the eviction moratorium for months. I don't know what tomorrow looks like, so my anxiety has really been severely bad just thinking about how I might not have a roof over my head. A group of Congress members held a rally asking their colleagues and the White House to provide more support for renters in need. The Wisconsin Department of Administration says offering rental assistance after the moratorium expires, and there's plenty of funding available for households that qualify. If you think you may qualify for rental assistance, you can find more information on the administration's website, which I don't need because I am completely caught up at this point. But oh, will you shut the fuck up? But yes, at this point, there are a lot of people, and really honestly, if you are legitimately struggling, then go in and fill out the paperwork. I have to wonder, really honestly, if a lot of the people weren't actually struggling, if they just looked at, said, like I said at the top of the show, oh, hey, I can't get evicted. I don't have to pay rent anymore. So, haha, landlord. I have to wonder if a lot of the people out there are looking at this, looking at the form, and I don't know what's on the form. Let's actually look at what's on the form. I was going to say that we're not going to look at this because I don't need it, but let's actually look at what's on the form here. Wisconsinites should not fear being evicted, having their utilities shut off, or being without a place to live because their budgets have been impacted by the pinko fucking pox. The Wisconsin Department of Administration is partnering with members of the Wisconsin Community Action Program Association, as well as Energy Services Incorporated, to assist eligible renters impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic and need help with their rent, utilities, and other housing. Who is eligible? Your household may qualify if at least one or more individuals in your home meet the following. Qualifies for unemployment or has experienced a reduction in household income, experienced major costs, or experienced financial struggles due to COVID-19, demonstrates a risk of being evicted or losing your home, and has a household income at or below 80% of the county median, which is massively up, especially once again in Dane County, against what most of your unemployment programs are in Wisconsin, which is you have to be, I think it's 10% above the poverty line to qualify for a lot of these programs. I know, I was struggling really hard when I lived in Kenosha. It's hard to believe that was just 7 years ago. But I was struggling really hard, and I actually looked into some of this, and even there, working 25 hours a week at $10 an hour, I didn't qualify for most of these programs. You just make too much money, kid. But I think this one is going to, and I think that's part of the reason that we're getting scared that people are actually going to do that, because I don't think a lot of the people, like I said, I think there are a lot of people out there who did just say, fuck that, fuck this. I can go on vacation with all this money I'm saving for not having to pay rent, and let's go eat the rich and eat the landlords. Meanwhile, they went and blew their money in some other rich person's coffers. But eat the rich. And now they look at this and say, I haven't actually experienced a reduction in household income. I could work from home for the entire time that we were out. And I haven't really experienced a major cost either. Maybe I had to buy a new laptop. And some of them might put that out there. But I think this part here is going to be the one that kicks most people off this program. So that's what that actually takes. Let's grab one from NBC. Top House Democrats call on Biden admin to extend eviction moratorium. He can't. We're going to touch base on this really quickly because this has mostly been covered already. Top House Democrats called on Biden admin on Sunday to extend the federal eviction moratorium that expired over the weekend after lawmakers failed to extend it themselves. In a joint statement, House Speaker Pelosi of California and other Democratic leaders said the move was a moral imperative that the administration needed to act on immediately to stave off the effects of the resurgence of the coronavirus. As the CDC doubles down on mask wearing and vaccination efforts, science and reason demand that they must also extend the moratorium in light of the Delta variant, the lawmakers said. The lawmakers, who said the moratorium should continue until October, added that billions of dollars in unspent rental relief money set aside by the American Rescue Plan also needed to be released. The White House has previously said the administration doesn't have the power to extend the moratorium. Biden urged the state and local governments Friday to immediately disperse unspent funds. Every state and local government must get these funds out to ensure that we prevent every eviction that we can, he said. So, and we've seen this, the Cori Bush stunt and everything else, so that's all we're going to do for this one. Let's grab this one, which I found hilarious, from Fox News. San Francisco activists gather at Pelosi's home to serve eviction notice. From Marissa Schultz. Housing and homeless advocates protested outside Nancy Pelosi's San Francisco home Saturday, demanding the House Speaker reconvene Congress to pass an extension to the expiring eviction moratorium. The House adjourned Friday for summer recess without passing legislation to extend a nationwide ban on evictions that is set to expire Saturday, prompting outrage from Progressive Squad and an overnight protest on the Capitol. Jackie Fielder says, in solidarity with all the people behind on rent and Cori Bush, were out at Speaker Pelosi's mansion delivering an eviction notice.
Great. So we have an eviction notice for the Speaker today.
Good.
It says, Dear Speaker Pelosi, you are hereby given immediate notice that millions of Americans will face eviction tonight when the eviction moratorium expires. We call upon you to immediately call Congress to session to vote to extend the eviction moratorium and keep people in their homes. We're in the midst of the second worst COVID surge.
I find it funny and amazing, by the way, that she's flouting the rule of one member of Congress, of one lawmaker, meanwhile going specifically down the rules of another lawmaker, the California mask mandate. So she can come out and say, okay, we're serving this eviction notice here, and it says please immediately reconvene Congress so that we can that we can go and continue to live for free in our apartments here.
To date, and this is not the time to allow evictions to begin. Housing is a human right. Hashtag eviction moratorium. Hashtag eviction crisis. So we'll be.
What algorithm are you trying to trip over when you put the hashtag on your piece of paper? What the fuck?
Serving this eviction notice to Nancy, Speaker Pelosi, right now. Place it on her door. Great. So we have an eviction notice for the.
Why do you have hashtags on there? What are you tagging? And what algorithm are you supposed to... Okay. That in and of itself, we're going to step aside from that for a second, just to come out and point out the fact that, this was all predictable. Now, as far as Barack goes, and we'll go all the way back to that, I know that, for the most part, I do think that if this had happened 2009, 2010 term Barack Obama, if the news media had let it happen, also keep in mind that the news media is a big controller off of all this, if the news media would have actually let us have anything like this, Barack would have come up and said, I'm the president, and the evil Supreme Court is going to try to block me, but, I'm just going to flick the pen, and I'm going to do it anyway, because I've got a pen and a phone. And this was all Bush's fault anyway, so I got a pen and a phone, and I'm going to make this happen. But it really points out to you what Nancy Pelosi and Joe Biden are, and to an extent Charles U. Schumer, because he's Nancy Pelosi's lapdog, but these are not progressive politicians. These people who are out there trying to serve this eviction notice were sold a pick and a poke. Oh, Joe Biden, he came out the campaign trail and he said he was going to be the most progressive politician ever. And Nancy Pelosi said she's going to get on board with the progressive agenda. No, these are corporate Democrats who have billion-dollar businesses, some of which own some of these properties people are getting evicted from. Properties that haven't had rent paid in them in almost a year. because you can't get evicted out of them. And they're going to go where the money is. They are corporate neoliberal Democrats. They're not progressives. They're not free shit for everybody. They're free shit for their big business buddies. All right. That's all I have for the eviction moratorium, you guys. Now that we've been at this for we've been at this for over an hour at this point. Now that we've been at this for over an hour, now let's get into the rest of the news, shall we? All right, reading from The Blaze, Texas House Democrat sounds alarm, political stunt failed. That's not what the headline says. Texas House Democrat calls for federal intervention as political stunt begins to collapse. I read the URL first. My bad. From Chris Enlow. Texas House Democrats, who fled the Lone Star State this month to block Republican-backed legislation from becoming law, are slowly realizing their political stunt will not produce the result they had hoped. Okay, you have my attention. Texas House Democrats fled to Washington, D.C. nearly 3 weeks ago to deny the House the quorum required to conduct business. The Democratic lawmakers, who are the minority party in the Texas legislature, sought to block a host of bills, including one that Republicans say will bolster the integrity of Texas elections, but Democrats claim will restrict voting rights. The lawmakers plan to stay in the nation's capital through the special legislative session they blocked. While in D.C., the lawmakers have met with Vice President Harris and have been meeting with congressional Democrats to lobby Congress to pass the For the People Act, a sweeping election reform bill being pushed by Democrats. Texas State Rep Ron Reynolds is now calling for a federal intervention with the realization that the political stunt will not ultimately work. In fact, Governor Greg Abbott has promised to keep calling special sessions, which is his right as the governor until the Texas legislature can finally pass the bills that the Texas House Democrats have thus far blocked. For us, it's do or die because Greg Abbott is going to call another special session as early as August 9th, Reynolds told Huffington Post. We hope the Senate realizes that we're on borrowed time and we really need federal intervention. The For the People Act is doomed to fail if brought to a vote in the Senate because Joe Manchin has said he will not support it without Republican support. Plus, questions of constitutionality surround the bill, considering the Constitution stipulates that the state legislatures are responsible for aspects of the elections in the For the People Act hopes to regulate. Which technically, that actually goes for the Voting Rights Act too, but nobody's called that one into question. But the Voting Rights Act of, was it 67 or 71? The one that they cite all the time. Let's actually look at that quick. Fighting. I can't type. 65. Voting Rights Act of 65. That's what it is. The current legislative session ends after the first week of August. Whether Texas House Democrats will return to the Lone Star State if Abbott immediately declares another special session has not yet been determined. But whenever they do, they may be immediately brought back to Texas House Chamber by law enforcement. Speaking with Fox News after Texas House Democrats left for Washington on private planes, Abbott said, "Once they step back in the state of Texas, they will be arrested and brought to the Texas Capitol, and we will be conducting business." House Speaker Dade Phelan, in fact, signed the first civil warrant this week for the arrest of State Rep. Philip Cortez, who went back to Washington after briefly returning to Texas to dialogue with Texas Republicans. However, according to the Texas Tribune, the warrant is not likely to have an impact since Texas law enforcement lacks the jurisdiction outside the state. Which is correct. So, that's where we go with that. And of course, yes, there are the aspects of that because they want the For the People Act because then they don't have to do their work. Then they don't have to go back and struggle in a majority Republican state and try to figure this back out. So, yeah, of course they want federal intervention from this, but that's where we're going to go with that. Let's talk about Susan Collins. Andrew Solander says Susan Collins calls the January 6th Select Committee partisan, says, "I do not think it was right for Pelosi to block Jim Jordan and Jim Banks from serving on it. On Jordan potentially being a material witness, well, there were many communications with President Trump that day."
But we should have had a 9/11 style commission to fully look at what happened.
Yeah, I mean, Mitch McConnell opposed it, and that's why it didn't happen. You called it a partisan committee. I should note that there are two Republicans on the committee, Cheney and Kinzinger. Do you have faith in them?
I respect both of them, but I do not think it was right for the speaker to decide which Republicans should be on the committee. Normally, if you have a select committee, the minority leader and the speaker get to pick the members.
Yeah, I mean, the reason she did that is because at least two of the members McCarthy picked to be on the committee are election liars, one of whom, Jim Jordan, is possibly even a material witness. He spoke with Trump that day.
Well,
Wait, election liars? This is CNN. You're supposed to be the most objective news source in the country.
there were many communications with President Trump that day. And look, as you know, I believe that that while the rioters are primarily responsible for what happened, there's no doubt in my mind that President Trump helped instigate and motivate the rioters. And that's one reason I voted to impeach him.
I voted to impeach him, but I think that we should have an objective. Susan Collins, everybody. From Newsweek. Why was that Susan Collins clip there? Anyway, Texas Governor Greg Abbott accuses Biden of creating constitutional crisis after DOJ lawsuit. This is from Ayla Slisko. Republican Texas Governor Greg Abbott accused President Biden of starting a constitutional crisis after being sued over his order directing state troopers to pull over vehicles suspected of containing undocumented immigrants. The DOJ filed a lawsuit against Texas over Abbott's executive order on Friday. Within hours, Abbott issued a statement insisting that the order was aimed at protecting public health amid the pinko fucking pox, while vowing that he has no intention of abdicating his responsibility to protect the people of Texas. The Biden admin has created a constitutional crisis between the federal government and the state of Texas, Abbott said. This stems from the Biden admin's refusal to enforce immigration laws and allow illegal immigrants with COVID-19 to enter our country. And it's actually an interesting situation because of, he brings up the constitutional crisis. Now, and at the time the Constitution was drafted, yes, we had the 13 colonies that became the United States of America. But border security really wasn't that big of a deal. We had a little bit of stuff going on with France, but, there weren't people who were jumping across off of this, so you didn't know who really had sovereignty over the immigration status of people who were coming in. That wasn't something that would come until much later. And now we have a massive national border with the country of Mexico, and another one with Canada too, but, we'll cross that bridge when we get there. But we have one with the country of Mexico, and by all rights, taking the first 5 articles of the Constitution at their word, Texas would have the sovereignty to decide how to handle the border crisis. That wouldn't be a federal government thing, to actually take the 5 articles of the Constitution at their word. Because Texas is a lot closer to Mexico, because they share a border, they would know best how to deal with the situation of what's coming across the border and how to stop it and stem it. So constitutionally, that would definitely be a states' rights thing. At least that's the way I interpret it. I mean, I'm not a Supreme Court justice, but that's the way I would interpret it to go down through the first 10 amendments and the first 5 articles of the Constitution. How we've gotten to the point where the federal government needs to be involved, I don't know. Well, I do know, but regardless of that, now we're here. Now we've got to come back and figure this out. So they're calling it a constitutional crisis. I still think it's an overreach for Abbott to be able to just stop a car going down the road and say, hey, buddy, you got any of them illegal immigrants in your car? Buford T. Justice stopping every car going down the road. You got any of them there illegal immigrants in there? All right, let's grab one. Let's go talk about Lauren Boebert. Maybe. Maybe we won't. Because the Blaze seems to be like they're going to be dumb today. All right. Let's skip that one because they're not going to do anything. Let's talk about CNBC. Trump tax returns must be released by IRS to Congress, Justice Department says. Well, that's against the law. I don't even have to read the details to tell you that this is against the law. Get a warrant, you piece of shit. From Dan Mangan and Kevin Breininger. The income tax returns of former President Trump must be released by the IRS to Congress, the DOJ said on Friday. The DOJ's Office of Legal Counsel said the Democratic-led House Ways and Means Committee had made the request with a legitimate legislative purpose to see Trump's tax returns. What? What is your legitimate legislative purpose to see the tax returns of a private citizen? With the stated objective of assessing how the IRS audits president's tax returns. That 39-page opinion is a reversal of an opinion by the same office during the Trump admin, which had backed the IRS's refusal to give the committee's Trump returns. Well, yeah, and then we go from Billy fucking Barr to Merrick Garland. Both of whom had an agenda, don't get me wrong, but still. Under federal law, the tax-related committees of Congress have broad right to obtain taxpayer information from the Treasury Department, the IRS's parent, the new opinion noted. No, they don't. No, they don't. That is incorrect. And by the way, just so you know, if they can do it to him, they can do it to you. Keep that in mind. The erosion of the Fourth Amendment. The statute at issue here is unambiguous. Upon written request of the chairman of one of the 3 congressional tax committees, the secretary shall furnish the requested tax information to the committee, Friday's opinion said. While those committees cannot force the executive branch of the government to compel disclosure of that information, the opinion noted that the tax returns should be denied to the committees only in exceptional circumstances and that the request lacks a legitimate legislative purpose. The opinion said that the OLC went astray in 2019 by suggesting that the executive branch should closely scrutinize the committee's stated justifications for its requests in a way that failed to give due respect and deference to the legislative branch of the government. The decision comes more than a year after the U.S. Supreme Court said that Trump's tax returns and other financial records had to be turned over by his longtime accountants to Manhattan District Attorney Cyrus Vance Jr. because of a subpoena issued as part of a criminal probe. And even that, by the way, is a stretch. And blah, 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 Weisselberg, blah, blah, blah. We're going to get him now. It's the walls are closing in. We're going to get him now. Full stop. Now, I don't understand what the obsession is with Congress having Trump's tax records. They don't have a legitimate legislative purpose to have his because he doesn't want them to have his. And they can go back because Biden released his tax records willingly. Hillary released her tax records willingly. Barack released his tax records willingly. Romney released his tax records willingly. McCain released his tax records willingly. W released his tax records willingly. Dole. Gore. Who was the other asshole that ran against W the second time? Not Gore, the other one. Kerry. Bill. HW, for God's sakes. They have all released their tax records willingly. That's public information. It's public record because they put them out into the public. Why don't you use any of those? Both a candidate and an actual president. Why do you have so much obsession with getting this one set of tax returns and violating the Fourth Amendment to do so? You have a wealth, decades of information at your fingertips that you can go back and sit and see how the IRS audits a president's tax return. You are looking for any excuse to harass a private citizen. I want you to remember that. That is a private citizen that you are harassing. I hope that goes to the Supreme Court, because that is going to be one of the fundamental teardowns of our structure and system. Not that our government gives a fuck about the Fourth and Fifth Amendment anymore, but if they actually go out and do this, that is a teardown of one of the fundamental protections that our founders put in place, because the Crown in England thought that they could just take whatever the hell they wanted on search and seizure and drum up a bunch of fake charges against somebody based on what they found without a warrant. So the obsession continues. We have to get those tax returns. All right, from Insider. Speaking of the Donald, Trump is owed $1 million tax refund for his Chicago skyscraper, but local officials are trying to block it. From Kelsey Vlamis. Former President Donald Trump is owed a tax refund of $1 million for his Chicago skyscraper, but local officials are trying to stop it from being issued. An Illinois tax agency ruled last month that Trump paid too much on his 2011 tax bill after the value of Trump International Hotel and Towers rooms and retail space was overassessed by the Cook County Board of Review, the Chicago Sun-Times reported. The ruling by the Illinois Property Tax Appeal Board means Trump is owed $1.03 million, which would come from property taxes due to the city and other government agencies. Chicago Public Schools will lose out on about $540,000, according to the Sun-Times. The Cook County State's Attorney's has since filed a lawsuit to block the refund. When reached by Insider, the state's attorney's office said it was unable to comment on pending litigation. The dispute is the latest development in the story of Trump's taxes in Chicago. Alderman Ed Burke, the longest-serving member of Chicago City Council in history, served as Trump's lawyer for more than a decade. His firm originally filed the tax appeal, arguing the value of Trump's building had been overestimated. Burke, a Democrat, helped Trump secure his $14 million in tax breaks on his Chicago skyscraper before parting ways with Trump's company in 2018, the Chicago Tribune reported. Now, as far as, because Insider's going to come out and say, oh, Cook County schools are going to lose $500,000 because of this. Evil Donald Trump is just taking money away from those poor inner city kids in their schools. You know why they're blocking this? It has nothing to do with the school, by the way. Because this blows a gigantic shotgun-sized hole in the narrative that Trump is hiding his tax return because he's not paying enough. He's not paying taxes at all. He's a tax cheat and a tax evader and tax this. No. He overpaid by $1 million into the state of Illinois. And it's on record. That's why they're trying to block this. And yes, they're going to get rich off the top of it too, but that's why they're trying to block this. Because they can't shift the narrative and say that, oh no, he actually did overpay. Which, I mean, Tim Pool, back when I listened to him, had a gigantic fucking boner for this idea that, rich people, they overpay their taxes all the time. That's what they do, because they overpay. That way they're safe. And they'll be entitled to a refund after everything gets reviewed, but they overpay because, then they're safe. Then they don't know. And for the Trump organization, I wouldn't be surprised if that's the case all across the country. On all the tax returns, you know what? Well, it wouldn't be him, obviously, because he doesn't know his own finances. He's got Weisselman for that. You know what? We're gonna... They say we owe... I don't know. What do we owe? $25 million in taxes. Let's give them 26, just to make sure. Then all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed, okay? Give them that much money, and we'll go appeal it. We'll go put it under audit, and then we'll get it back, okay? So, that's what that's coming off of. Let's grab one here from NPR for you. Let's shift gears and talk about the coronavirus. Record-breaking COVID-19 cases lead Olympic host Japan to expand a state of emergency. This is from Anthony Kuhn. remember, your taxpayer dollars don't fund enough of NPR. And we need more money. Comrade, it's not your money, it's our money, and we see the donate links all the time. Pay your taxes so that we can get our money, comrade. And then also hit the donate button, because then it's also our money. And if you get halfway through this article, we'll still flash the thing right in your face, because it's not your money, comrade, it's our money. Help us support communism across the country. National Progressive Radio, NPR. Let's see what Anthony Kuhn has to say. Japan extended a state of emergency to areas around the capital, Tokyo, and to its second largest city, Osaka, on Friday, following a record-setting surge in the pinko fucking pox. Japan saw new Kamikuth cases surpass 10,000 for 2 days in a row, while Tokyo cases broke records for 3 days in a row through Thursday. The capital's 7-day rolling average jumped 80.5% over the previous week. The number of hospitalized COVID-19 patients has doubled over the past month, and experts estimate that the current fifth wave of infections still has a week or two to go before reaching its peak. The third wave, the fourth wave, the fifth wave. Following a request from local officials, the central government extended the emergency to China, or Chiba rather, not China, China. We're not going to China, we're going to Chiba. Chiba, okay. It's not China. Chiba. They're great people over in Chiba. Okay. Saitama, Kanagawa, prefectures bordering Tokyo, in addition to Osaka. The emergency will run from Monday through the end of August. An emergency already in effect in Tokyo on the island prefecture of Okinawa will be extended from its current end date of August 22nd through the end of the month, and 5 other prefectures, including the northernmost island of prefecture of Hokkaido and Kyoto and Hyogo's prefectures near Osaka, will go under looser quasi-emergency. What the hell is a prefecture? I don't know what that is. Well, let's find out. A district under the government of a prefect. A prefect's office or tenure, the official residence or headquarters of a prefect, and rage fans besiege the prefecture of the police. So it sounds like it's a state by a different name. Okay, cool. We learn something new every day. Opinion polls have shown Japanese respondents are not convinced by official reassurances that the games will not spread the pinko fucking pox to the general population. Prime Minister Yoshide Suga insists that the games have nothing to do with the spike in infections that is canceling the games, which began a week ago, is not an option. As in other countries, emergencies and other social distancing measures are becoming less effective at keeping Japanese citizens at home, as the proportion of cases, the highly infectious Delta virus, has been growing and vaccinations are failing to keep pace. Experts say tougher measures are needed. I feel a great sense of danger, Dr. Shigeru Omi, the government's top COVID-19 advisor, said on Thursday. There is barely any prospect that we can curtail this outbreak. I don't know who the fuck is calling me from a 351 area code, but... The medical care system is on the brink of collapse in some areas. Kanagawa Governor Yuji Kuroya warned. An increasing number of COVID patients in Tokyo and elsewhere are unable to get hospital beds and await treatment at home. Tokyo Governor Yuriko Koike has urged the capital's young people to get vaccinated, but a shortfall in supply means that many young people who want the jabs can't get them. Just over a quarter of the population has been fully vaccinated. There you go, Biden. We've got about as many people over here that have been vaccinated as you want to get vaccinated. You say there's so much supply, and you say that Tokyo, Japan, is our biggest ally, which that shifts from day to day. Go start sending them over there. All right, from the New York Post, unvaccinated U.S. swimmer in hot water over maskless interview. From Joshua Rhett Miller. An unvaccinated swimmer for Team USA made waves Oh, it's a waves pun. Out of the Tokyo Olympics pool Friday for not wearing a mask during interviews with reporters following a disappointing finish. The decision by Michael Andrew, a 22-year-old first-time Olympian from California, drew an initial rebuke from the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee, which said it violated the COVID-19 mitigation measures at the 2020 Games. But U.S. OPC officials reversed course just hours later after determining he wasn't bucking the public safety protocols after all. Michael has been reminded that the Games policy and established COVID mitigation protocols and has acknowledged the importance of following all guidelines intended to keep athletes and the community safe, U.S. OPC officials said. Okay. And on that, too, I'm going to say the same thing I've always said. Dude, you are a guest in somebody else's country. Be that as it may, I look at this and I say that you probably don't have the same level of risk as a lot of other people are because you are a 22-year-old in the peak of health, but you are still a guest in somebody else's country. So follow the rules of somebody else's country or don't go to their country. I choose not to go to their country because I think their rules are draconian. But if you are a guest in somebody else's country, just like if you're a guest in somebody else's house and they say, hey, can you take your shoes off at the door? You take your shoes off at the door. It's the same thing. If you're a guest over there and they say, you're not vaccinated, have a mask on every time you do an interview, then be a gracious guest or get the fuck out of their country. Non-aggression principle, you guys. It's not hard. All right, from the Blaze. Let's see if this one will work, because I know the other Blaze one didn't work. Yes, this one will work. U.S. Surgeon General recommends fully vaccinated people wear masks outdoors to protect the unvaccinated. From Paul Saka. U.S. Surgeon General Vivek Murthy is recommending that fully vaccinated individuals wear face masks outdoors to protect the unvaccinated. Murthy made the suggestion during an appearance on MSDNC where he said fully vaccinated individuals wearing masks indoors and outdoors was an extra step of protection to unvaccinated people. There's the rest of the article. MSDNC anchor Andrea Mitchell asked Murthy about breakthrough cases, specifically the possibility of a fully vaccinated person being infected with the pinko fucking pox and spreading the virus to unvaccinated individuals, such as young children or immunocompromised adults. So the people that we're most concerned about are the unvaccinated, Murthy responded to her question from the cable TV news host. For example, if you happen to have a lot of interaction with folks who are unvaccinated, let's say you're a parent like me who has young children at home who are not vaccinated, that's a circumstance where we're being extra cautious and wearing a mask, even though if you're fully vaccinated, wearing it outside, when you're in indoor public locations is an extra step to protecting those at home. I want to emphasize, though, that if you are vaccinated, in the likelihood of having a breakthrough infection is still low because, again, the vaccines are working to help prevent infection, particularly serious infection, Murthy said Wednesday. But in the unusual event that a breakthrough does happen, we know transmission can take place. Essentially, we're sitting at a position right now where we're starting to see that the vaccine doesn't do crap, and the mask we already knew didn't do crap. I mean, you have mask mandates. Hard mask mandates in California. California was one of the hardest hit states in the country. You had mask mandates in New York. New York was one of the hardest hit states, especially in New York City in the country, because people are living on top of each other. Literally, they're living on top of each other. But all the places that had massive mask mandates had some of the higher transmissibility rates. Even Wisconsin, with its pseudo-mask mandate that nobody gave a fuck about. I mean, it was slower, but it didn't seem like it was that big of a... it didn't seem like it was mitigating anything. As Styx likes to say, I mean, he writes for the occult, or edits the occult, so he would know better than any of the rest of us. Come on, man. I mean, it's like a magical fucking talisman, okay? You wear the mask, you wear the rose hips on your necklace, and it's supposed to ward off the evil spirits that make you sick. It's a bunch of fucking bullshit is what it is. Makes you feel good. Makes you feel like you're doing something. This CNBC article was a little bit clickbaity as well because, they want you to just come in here and say, look at all the breakthrough. We have to lock down again. Breakthrough COVID cases. At least 125,000 fully vaccinated Americans have tested positive. From Laura Strickler. At least 125,000 fully vaccinated Americans have tested positive for COVID, and 1,400 of those have died, according to data collected by NBC News. Oh my God, let's panic. Second paragraph. The 125,682 breakthrough cases in 38 states found by NBC News represent less than 0.08% rather, of the 164.2 million plus people who have fully vaccinated since January, or about 1 in every 1,300. The number of cases and deaths among the vaccinated is very small compared to the number among the unvaccinated. A former Biden advisor on COVID estimated that 98 to 99% of the deaths are among the unvaccinated. And yes, that's something that we pay attention to and point out the fact that, it's less than 0.1% of the people that are... Dude, these governments that have an agenda to go get you vaccinated are cooking the books, I promise you. You know how I know that? Because they cook the books to give you the deaths and the cases before the coronavirus Delta variant came out, before the vaccines came out. Oh, this guy fell off a ladder and broke his neck. Oh, well, he must have asphyxiated and passed out because he couldn't breathe because we tested him and we found out that he's got the coronavirus. Oh, this guy jammed his fucking motorcycle into the back of a semi. And he died because he wasn't wearing a helmet, but he died of coronavirus. This guy got socially isolated because of social distancing and lockdowns, and he blew his fucking brains out. He died of coronavirus. They cooked the books the first time. Don't tell me they're not cooking the books the second fucking time. Because I don't believe you. I don't. I have no reason to believe you. From Newsweek, Asa Hutchinson met with jeers during COVID event as cases surge in Arkansas. Liar! From Xander Landon. Arkansas Governor Asa Hutchinson faced some backlash during an event he hosted on Friday in an effort to promote COVID-19 vaccinations. Hutchinson, a Republican, was met with heckling from some members of the audience who called him a liar. The Arkansas Democrat-Gazette reported on Saturday some members of the audience held up signs as the governor and Arkansas Secretary of Health, Dr. Jose Romero, spoke. Not all of the more than 100 attendees at the event, which was held at the Siloam Springs Community Building, protested the governor. Some spoke in favor of vaccinations and raised concerns about the public health risks of the pinko fucking pox, according to the newspaper. The event came as pinko pox cases are surging in Arkansas. As the highly contagious Delta variant spreads through the U.S., the state is seeking the highest number of Commie-Coof cases since January, local news station KARK reported on Friday. State officials reported more than 25 new cases both Thursday and Friday. As of Friday, the number of people hospitalized with COVID-19 infections neared 1,100. On Thursday, Hutchinson declared a public health emergency and called for a special legislative session to give school officials the flexibility to impose mask mandates. See, I kind of like that, actually. Not the fact that we're having mask mandates at school, but at least he's giving it down to the district rather than trying to mandate it back up across right out of Little Rock. I enjoy that at least. But this is a person who is sitting in the same office that Bill Clinton once sat in. So, I mean, some stuff to see with that. Really, honestly, it should always be up to the locality anyway. But they're calling him a liar on top of it. Let's grab one from the New York Post. Massive spike in reported increase of COVID-19 deaths was skewed by old data. From Jesse O'Neill. This is interesting. A massive 300% hike in nationwide COVID-19 deaths recorded Friday by Johns Hopkins was skewed by states dumping data that in one case dated back as far as last spring, according to a report. The university, which has been a trusted source of coronavirus information since the start of the pandemic, reported that the U.S. deaths surged from 321 on Thursday to 891 on Friday as the Delta variant quickly spreads through much more of the country. Florida was responsible for a huge chunk of the increase, with 409 of Friday's death toll coming from that state, according to the Daily Mail. However, Florida only releases weekly data on Friday, making the day-to-day totals reported by the university unclear and overblown, the outlet said. Figures released in Delaware also added to the surging daily increase. As the state announced 130 new deaths on Friday, the tabloid reported, the dramatic figure was misleading because those deaths actually occurred between mid-May of 2020 and late last month and were added after the first state reviewed death certificates, according to the article. Data from Michigan, which only releases statistics biweekly, also reportedly added to the distorted total. The true day-to-day increase of the nationwide COVID-19 deaths was actually only about 2.5%, according to the outlet. And I still don't believe that at this point. I don't believe any of the numbers. There's so much conglomeration out here, and most of it's fucking fear porn anyway, so. From NBC4 out of New York, willing to go to jail, Rudy Giuliani calls Ukraine investigation lawless. No author given. In a bombshell interview, Rudolph W. Giuliani talked to NBC New York about the months-long federal probe, accusing him of illegal Ukraine dealings, an investigation he calls lawless. The former New York City mayor has been the subject of investigations and FBI scrutiny since two business associates were arrested in 2019 in a separate case, but in an exclusive interview with News 4, Giuliani emphatically maintained that he did nothing wrong, becoming seemingly fixated on declaring his innocence. I committed no crime, and if you think I committed a crime, you're probably really stupid, because you don't know who I am, Giuliani said as an investigation looms into whether he was working as an unregistered lobbyist for Ukraine officials. He said that he was working for then-President Trump as his lawyer at the time. It's the guy who put the mafia in jail, terrorists in jail, Ed Cook's commissioner in jail, is the worst people on Wall Street. I'm not going to file a form? I mean, that's just crazy, he said. Giuliani initially agreed to speak with NBC New York at the World Trade Center Memorial in Lower Manhattan for an upcoming story about the 20th anniversary of the September 11th terror attacks. But it was clear that there were other things weighing on his mind to follow from the recent election and the fact that he's still facing a criminal investigation. Giuliani voiced frustration at the FBI searches of his home and law office, calling the investigation misguided and politically motivated. I'm more than willing to go to jail if they want to put me in jail, and if they do, they're going to suffer the consequences in heaven, he said. I didn't do anything wrong. When asked why he would be willing to go to jail if he's not guilty, Giuliani replied, because they lie and they cheat. As far as Giuliani, I don't think that... See, it's hard for me because I don't think that he should have been calling over to the Ukraine either, not in the capacity that he was in. Now, yes, if he'd have registered as a foreign lobbyist, then yeah, that's one thing. As far as jail time goes, I don't think that that's a jail-worthy offense, though. Give him the fine, send him out the door, make fucking Donald pay the fine, because he said there was probably some exchange over there that says, hey, Rudy, there's something going on in Ukraine, and I don't know what to do about it. And Rudy looked at this and said, I'll do something about this. So give him a fine and send him out the door. You don't got to put somebody like this in jail unless you've got a political fucking axe to grind, which seems to be the case in this. From the Post-Millennial, we got just a few more here, then we will do a Ferengi rule of acquisition and head out of here. 2/3 of voters want Congress to investigate the 2020 riots by a survey. From Mia Cathell. Now that House Democrats have choreographed a select bipartisan committee to investigate the Selfie Fest, most voters believe that Congress should also investigate the violent Black Lives Matter riots that terrorized major Democrat-led cities throughout 2020, according to a new survey. A recent national telephone and online survey by the National Police Association and Rasmussen, conducted in mid-July, finds that 66% of likely American voters think Congress should investigate last year's violent riots when more than 2,000 police officers suffered injuries in the line of duty, compared to 21% of respondents who don't think Congress should investigate last year's protests, and 13% of voters who are not sure. The number of voters who want Congress to investigate last year's Black Lives Matter Antifa riots is higher than 49%, who expressed support for House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's Select Committee investigation of the Selfie Fest. 42% of the surveyed voters don't support Pelosi's probe, and 63% think the BLM rioters should be charged like the January 6th rioters. Okay. I think that the riots should be investigated because I think there was some fucked up stuff that went on there. I think these summer riots should be looked into deeply and hardly. We should know what's going on within these riots. But there's no reason for Congress to do it. The same thing with the January 6th Selfie Fest. We've got the FBI, we've got the DOJ, we've got several law enforcement agencies that are looking into this already, including the crooked Capitol Police. Why does Congress need to look into it? Let law enforcement agencies look into some of this and let Congress make laws or repeal laws. I really prefer they repeal laws, but let Congress do the legislation. You don't need to investigate this. There is no reason for that on either of these cases. Let the law enforcement agencies do their jobs. From the New York Post, activist Shaun King lives lavishly in lakefront New Jersey home. From Isabel Vincent. Shaun King has built his image on being a champion of the poor and disenfranchised. But the one controversial civil rights activist lives like a one-percenter in a sprawling lakefront home, records show. King, 41, moved earlier this year from a luxury 2-bedroom apartment in downtown Brooklyn to the 5-bedroom, 3,000-square-foot North Brunswick, New Jersey property with a lakefront backyard and a gourmet kitchen, according to public records. The property, surrounded by tall, lush trees, was purchased by King's wife, Rai Tonisha King, a PhD candidate and educator, in November of 2020 for $842,000, public records show. King has been dogged for years by allegations of shady dealings in his charitable efforts in movements he has founded, including lack of transparency and money he has raised for several criminal justice initiatives as he backed. Fellow activists and those who worked with him, raising cash for everything from Haitian orphans to the families of black men killed by police, have repeatedly raised questions about King's leadership and in some cases asked where the donations have gone. Samaria Rice, whose 12-year-old son Tamir was shot dead by cops in Cleveland in November of 2014, blasted King on social media, accusing him of soliciting funds in her dead son's name without her permission and even about his own identity as black or biracial. Personally, I don't understand how you sleep at night, she wrote in an Instagram post addressed to King last month after the activist revealed details of a personal conversation he had with Rice. I never gave you permission to raise nothing. Along with the United States, you robbed me for the death of my son. There's the property right there. That's the guy that wants to go off and help the poor people. He's a grifter. We all knew that. Some more Arkansas news. I kind of wanted to talk about this just a second, not because it's of particular note, but the note of the fact that there's no riots over this. There's nobody taking to the streets over this. And I wanted to know why. I have not read this article. I found this right before going live. Arkansas State Police investigating death of man in custody of Hot Springs Police. From Chris Counts. Arkansas State Police are investigating after a man died while in the custody of Hot Springs Police on Saturday morning. According to investigators, officers responded to a call for a welfare check at 9:45 a.m. and located 30-year-old Brandon Clorick in Hot Springs, who was placed into custody due to his behavior. Authorities say that while in custody, Clorick became unresponsive and was transported to the local hospital where he later died. Hot Springs police requested Arkansas State Police to take over the investigation. The 3 officers involved, per policy, have been placed on administrative leave pending the outcome of the investigation. Okay, where are the riots? Where are the people blowing up buildings and burning shit down? So, I don't know any details about this. I don't know anything, but the fact that they're going off and investigating right now tells me that there's probably something else that's shifty that happened with this. And the fact that they're trying to pass the buck off at this point to state police tells me that we should probably have some questions about this. But we'll see. Let's do some more real estate news. Osama bin Laden's family abandoned Bel Air estate list for $28 million. From Mary Kay Jacob. Osama bin Laden's brother, Ibrahim bin Laden, has listed his longtime Bel Air mansion for a whopping $28 million, the Post can confirm. Ibrahim, who is the older half-brother of the late terrorist, has owned property for nearly 4 decades, since '83. Property records show Ibrahim purchased the Mediterranean villa-style mansion for $1,653,000 at the time, what would be roughly $5.5 million after accounting for 38 years of inflation. But according to the listing, he hasn't occupied the home since the September 11th attacks. Ready for redoing, the owner has not been here for over 20 years, the listing states. Despite its abandoned state, the property's price is based on its land value only and location. Situated in the prestigious Lower Bel Air neighborhood, the residence spans 7,100 square feet on more than 2 acres of land and is made up of 7 bedrooms and 5 bathrooms. Well, it's a fixer-upper for sure. Anybody want to live in bin Laden's house? It's there. Ready to go. Coldwell Banker is the realtor in this, so there you go. All right, let's see. The Daily Caller. Donald Trump suggests LeBron should consider becoming a transgender woman. I want to read a little bit of this article because apparently it was quite funny. They were talking about this in the Discord. I've not read it yet. Donald Trump wonders how great LeBron James would be at basketball if he became a transgender woman. From David Hookstead. Former President Trump dropped a hypothetical for the ages over the weekend. The 45th president appeared on Saturday at the Protect Our Elections rally in Arizona, and he questioned how great LeBron James would still be if he became a woman. Somebody said that if LeBron James ever decided to get the operation, how he would be on the court, Trump asked his audience at the Protect Our Elections rally Saturday, according to The Sun. I'll be honest though, look, we all like to win. If I were a coach, I'll tell you, I wouldn't be talking to too many women. As we know women, I'd be getting some of these people that they're women. He further added when talking about how he only recruit transgender athletes to compete against women. The 45th president also touched on the NBA's atrocious ratings and told his fans, "Did you see the basketball ratings, which were terrible, but went up after his teams were defeated?" I have 2 points to make here. First, LeBron James would score 150 points in a WNBA game if he wanted to. I don't care if you don't like him and you hate his politics. The LA Lakers star could drop 150 on our women's Olympics team if he wanted to without breaking a sweat. It would be absolutely amazing to see. Every time he touched the ball, he would score. Secondly, I've actually wondered what would happen if you recruited a group of guys claiming to be women and had them play elite female competition. Like, imagine a college basketball team made up of washed-up transgender former high school players. Did they win the national title? I think they would, and they would win it pretty easily. So this is kind of based, and it kind of points out the fact that, yes, you can chop off your wiener, but you still have the expanded lung functionality. You still have the denser muscle mass. You still have the enlarged heart. You still have all these other advantages over somebody who was born as a woman. And it's not just LeBron, like he pointed out. A high school team of transgender athletes who went under the knife and got all their bits and tackle fucking cut off would still be more powerful than most of your WNBA teams today. Just because of the biological advantages that come with that. All right, I've got one from Cointelegraph, put it to us in the Discord. U.S. government delves deeper into crypto accountability with $10 million bounty. From Turner Wright. The U.S. State Department has announced it will be taking a seemingly more active role in the pursuit of keeping some crypto users accountable. According to a Thursday Bloomberg report, the Biden admin intends to ramp up efforts to trace crypto payments, particularly when it comes to ransomware attacks. The government plans to address cybersecurity and crypto's role in payments such attacks. The report comes as the State Department recently announced its Rewards for Justice program would be offering bounties up to $10 million for assistance in identifying actors responsible for cyber attacks on criminal infrastructure in the United States. The government agency said it has set up a tip line to the Tor browser network developed by U.S. officials for anonymous internet communications and may offer crypto payments for relevant information on ransomware attack. Last month, U.S. officials, as part of the government task force, seized more than $2 million in crypto used to pay for ransom following an attack on the Colonial Pipeline system. Deputy AG Lisa Monaco said at the time the seizure of the assets was the first major operation in the task force mission to investigate, disrupt, and prosecute cyber attacks on critical infrastructure, hinting it would continue looking into similar attacks. So basically at this point, if you make a cyber attack, and you get the ransom paid to you, there's a $10 million bounty on your fucking head. But don't worry, Bitcoin is totally untraceable, and they can use it to buy drugs and do prostitution and stuff like that. Ooh, scary Bitcoin, you better use the government digital currency, which I fully believe will be coming in the near future. Let's grab one from Reuters. PayPal to research transactions that fund hate groups and extremists. From Anna Herrera. PayPal is partnering with nonprofit organization ADL to investigate how extremists and hate movements in the U.S. take advantage of financial platforms to fund their criminal activities. The initiative will be led through ADL Centers on Extremism and will focus on uncovering and disrupting the financial flows, supporting white supremacist and anti-government organizations. It will look at network spreading and profiting from anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, racism, anti-immigration, anti-black, anti-Hispanic, and anti-Asian bigotry. The information collected through the initiatives will be shared with other firms in the financial industry, law enforcement, and policymakers, PayPal said. So this is PayPal coming out and telling you that if you hold these views that are outside of the norm, these views that are, were mainstream not that long ago, and these views that are egregious, you will no longer bank. You will no longer be a member of society. You will not buy and sell unless you have the mark of the beast. And his number was 666. Unless you're a good little boy, you can't use PayPal. And they're going to tell all the other banks too, hey, we kicked this guy off PayPal, so you better kick him out of his fucking accounts too. And I use PayPal. That's the worst part of it. Because everybody's got it. And you guys can all pay me. The links are in the chat. You guys can come off and throw me a couple bucks off of this, except it's going to go to PayPal, which is going to go to the ADL. All right, two more, then we will do the rules of acquisition. From the BBC. As a person who likes historical stuff, this actually touched me a little bit. I'm kind of happy for this. They give no author because it's the BBC, but Stonehenge Tunnel campaigners win court battle. Campaigners have won a court battle to prevent the scandalous construction of a road tunnel near Stonehenge. The £1.7 billion Highways England project aimed to reduce A303 congestion, but campaigners said it would detrimentally affect the World Heritage Site. The government approved plans in 2020 for a 2-mile tunnel to be crafted near the Wiltshire Monument. Mr. Justice Holgate's ruling means the order granted by Transport Secretary Grant Shapps has been quashed. Highways England said it wants to build the tunnel to reduce traffic and cut journey times on the A303, which is the most direct route for motorists traveling between southeast and southwest and is used by thousands of people daily. The BBC understands the project will have to be frozen while the government considers its next steps. In his ruling, the judge found Mr. Shapps' decision was unlawful on 2 grounds. He found there was a material error of law in the government's decision-making process, as there was no evidence of the impact on each individual asset at the site, and he said Mr. Shapps had failed to consider alternative schemes in accordance with the World Heritage Convention and common laws. The Department of Transportation spokesperson said, "We are disappointed in the judgment and are considering it carefully before deciding how we proceed." In 2020, Stave Stonehenge World Heritage Site crowdfunded £50,000 needed to bring a judicial review to the High Court. John Adams, SSWHS's director, said, "We could not be more pleased about the outcome of the legal challenge. Now that we are facing a climate emergency, it is all the more important that the ruling should be a wake-up call for the government. It should look again at its roads program and take action to reduce road traffic and eliminate any need to build new and wider roads that threaten the environment as well as our cultural heritage." So, and yeah, I mean, really honestly, especially if you're working around something that's thousands of years old at this point, prehistoric, and nobody knows quite what this thing does, but, you know, at some point I hope we can figure out, then yeah, keep your road away from it. And I hate roads to begin with, but yeah, we don't need to put a road that close to this and threaten the balance of the thing. At least until we figure out what the hell it does. And maybe one of us can stand out. Maybe somebody in this audience can stand out in the middle of Stonehenge and communicate with aliens from outer space, or whatever the hell it was supposed to be. So yes, good. Hopefully it can still be there for generations to come to sit back here and say, what the hell were those old dudes thinking? All right, last one. Then it's time for the rules of acquisition and to head out of here for the day. Because of the France protests, I thought that we would enjoy this video because a lot of us are not fans of cops. And I mean, me, I don't mind the cops because they're good blue-collar workers. I just don't like the laws that they have to enforce. But even still, we can sit back and enjoy this. French police officers fall over a bin, which is on fire. Oh, there he goes. Well, it seems that there's more protests going on in France than there is in this country, which is weird because, you know, France's national flag is white. But good. Let's get these people to stand up for their freedoms, and then let's also stand up for our freedoms at this point. All right, last thing that we do is read one of the Ferengi rules of acquisition, study it, and figure out how it can apply to our everyday lives here. We are on the 14th rule of acquisition. Sometimes the quickest way to find profits is to let them find you. So, and as most people who have watched Star Trek know, the Ferengi, they are a profit-driven, hyper-capitalistic, male-centric society. They don't let their women wear clothes. They don't. I mean, they're hyper-traditional, hyper-capitalistic. It was It was supposed to be a way for Roddenberry to come out and say how bad the evil capitalist system of the United States was, and how the good old times were really bad because we want our women naked, burying children, and chained up to the kitchen and shit like that. But, they do find some good nuggets of stuff off of this here. So the quickest way to find profits is to let them find you. You don't always go out, and you should have some drive. You always should have some drive, and always seek out. Have the lobes for business, as you will. Keep your ears open and look for opportunities out there. But, sometimes you don't have to go out and drive to get it. You don't have to pursue it. You don't have to force it. Just sit back, especially if you've got a product or something to sell, and it may not be the absolute time for it. You can come out and you can make your product, and you could advertise it forever. Like, say you've got a widget that's going to help with nasal irrigation. That's a good one, because I hear the advertisements on the news all the time. Something you would have never thought about before the pandemic: nasal irrigation, cleaning out your nose. Now, I still wouldn't do that kind of thing, but what did they point out in all the commercials? It's your air filter, and we've learned this from the pandemic, that it filters in all the diseases going in and out of your body. So you should go and clean it out with nasal irrigation. Nobody would have thought of that before the pandemic. So this guy can throw in a half-hearted advertisement on the right-wing news channels all the time for nasal irrigation and not have a lot of success with it until we get the pandemic coming by. And now people are just looking for ways to be more holistic, more clean, and make sure that their noses are clean. Now this guy is probably making at least a little bit of bank here, so now he's waited for his profits to come to him. And sometimes that happens as well. I know a person who bought a large chunk of land in relatively unknown Pleasant Prairie at the time. I mean, most people in the country still don't know what Pleasant Prairie is. It's a suburb of Kenosha. But this person bought a large chunk of land in Pleasant Prairie, and he parceled it off. And he made bank doing so because he knew at the right time that he wanted to get out of the city, because he was living in Kenosha at the time. This was in the mid-90s. He was living in Kenosha at the time. He wanted to get out of the city. The land was cheap, because that's all he wanted. He wanted to have a little bit of land so he could go out and shoot guns and not have to be around anybody. But then he turned around because he started to see that a lot of other industry was moving out of the city of Kenosha proper and moving out to Pleasant Prairie. So he came back and he parceled all that land off. And it made a mint doing so too, by the way. Most of the other people that know him don't know what kind of money he has. I don't know how much money he actually has, but I have an idea. And he doesn't live like he's got a bunch of money either, which is the best part because, he didn't let it affect him. But yeah, he let the opportunity come to him. He got what he wanted, and then the opportunity came to him, and he said, hey, I can make money off of this. And he made money off of it. That's what we need to look for. Look for opportunities out there that you don't necessarily have to go out and pursue hard, but opportunities where people can come out and bring the opportunity to you. If you've got the lobes for business, you know what the difference is. And you can do well with it as well. And that's it. All right, let's head out of here for the day. Let's change up the scene here. Let's go. Let's put some music on. Where's my music? Where's my music? I don't have my music up because I had to restart my system. Not yet. We don't want to download that yet. All right, we're going to head out of here for the day. So thank you guys for coming and hanging out with us in the live chat. Remember, if you are just joining us now, or if you're over on Twitch right now, stick around after you see the title card, because we're going to go raid my friend Steven Ignoramus, who is also going to be coming in on this new project that we have coming up in the fall. So go and check him out as well. Otherwise, if you're on all the other platforms, we will see you later on tonight when I host the wonderful Remzo Martinez. I was just on his podcast, which is going to release mid-August. It was a fairly emotional time for me, so you guys go and check that out. But he's going to come in and sit in for the Red Net Show for the week, which is going to be cool because it'll give us a chance to come back and sit down and welcome in more of the We Are Libertarians Network. into our little network over here. So definitely looking forward to that. That will be at 5:30 Central Time on these same platforms you're watching right now. Definitely a good conversation to come. And we'll be talking about eviction moratorium. We'll be talking about infrastructure. We'll be talking about Olympics and all kinds of other good stuff. So definitely looking forward to see you on our weekly news roundup and discussion. Looking forward to that. Otherwise, stick around for Stephen Ignoramus, or we'll be back here tomorrow for more Contemporary. Until then, I am Jay Edgar, and this is Contemporary. Take care.